We are going to have the panel in front of here, but firstly I would like to welcome you warmly this morning to Chalmers E-village Morning Boost, as usual. We used to have one person standing up and giving inspiration, but today's topic, we thought it would be interesting to also have a discussion. And the discussion actually already started when we came into this door this morning, and part of the panel came here and they said, are you pro or con? I don't know. Why? How? And they already started the discussion. So I think we're going to hear lots of pro and cons and have lots of questions, and we're going to open up for questions for you. But I'm not the one who's going to lead this discussions today. It's Kristina Hejdenberg, so I welcome you to the stage.
Yeah, and I'll just say hi, I'm Kristina. I'm the track manager for the School of Entrepreneurship, where we actually have two former students on stage today. That's great, I think, Jonas and Andreas, and of course, students in the audience as well. And well, I've been honored to take this role as moderator today, and I will have some questions of my own, but it's really important. If you have questions, then of course ask them, and I'll make sure that we get answers. But I'm not the one who's going to do all the work here, so I have a great panel with me, and I'll let them introduce themselves. And then the layout will be that Andreas will do a presentation about Stayble Therapeutics and their journey to the stock market, and then we'll have the discussion or talk about IPOs. Yes or no? So, Andreas, would you like to start to introduce yourself?
Sure.
You're already.
Can you hear me now? Perfect. So my name is Andreas Gerward. I'm the CEO of Stayble Therapeutics. As you said, I have a background from Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship. Was going through the GIBS program back in 2013. So it's been a couple of years with Stayble, but a very exciting journey. Studied here at Vasa before that.
Okay, my name is Jonas Bergman. I'm investment director at Chalmers Ventures. And we have around 8-ish company in our fantastic portfolio. Some of them are listed, I think around 15 companies are listed. And we work with the different stages of maturity of the companies, venture creation phase, incubation, and then later stages as well. And prior to Chalmers Ventures, I was actually CEO of a company called Integrum that was listed on Nasdaq 2017.
Hi everybody, I'm Mattias Ljung from Grant Thornton. I'm a certified public accountant, which means I can guide you and help you with this IPO phase and try to make your company what we call IPO ready, which can take some time. And as a part of that, I usually try to collaborate with my good friend Tobias.
Thank you. Tobias Bjarneborg, also at Grant Thornton. I'm a tax consultant, so I work with the tax aspect of all things, and mainly with structures and ownership questions. That's kind of my primary area.
Great. So we'll leave the floor to you, Andreas, to start with your presentation.
Perfect. Thank you very much. It's always strange standing just next to it. So, hi everyone. This is Stayble. We're working with chronic low back pain, and we try to really help all the patients that today are suffering without any effective treatments. So I thought the idea today was to give you a brief introduction to what we are doing, then give you a little bit of the journey from 2014 when we started the company all the way to the IPO in 2020. But just to give you a setting, we really try to help patients suffering with degenerative disc disease by offering something that is really targeting the underlying cause of back pain. I think that's one of the key words with Stayble, that we are not just trying to treat the symptom of pain, we're actually trying to make the patient long-term pain relieved. So that's a very important factor. And we also really try to focus on areas where there are currently no effective treatments. I will come back to that a little bit later, but patients suffering from discogenic back pain is really, they don't have any alternatives. You have physiotherapy, you have analgesics, and when they don't work, you don't really have anything. So you quite often end up in a never-ending loop without effective treatments. So that's where we would like to come in and offer something that really can help, and really help in the early stage. You don't have to suffer for 10 years or 15 years as many of our patients do. So I think we could just start a little bit just setting the scene. Why are we working within pain? I think it's a lot about the unmet medical need, as I was saying in the beginning. It's also something where we meet a lot of patients that are perhaps not the group that you think of. A typical patient for us is somewhere between 30 to 50 years old. It's really a working population. It's the small things that are very difficult. Lifting your kids, visiting a friend, working. So most of our patients are working part-time or are not working at all. So it's really about getting quality of life back, getting them back into society. And I think that's very positive and something that really triggers me to work with every day. We've actually been able to help these patients going back to society. And I think also from an opportunity perspective, this is really an area with quite little innovation. It's been new types of improved analgesics and physiotherapy, new types of screws and plate for spinal fusion, but not really anything truly innovative for the last years. So we really have the opportunity to be one of the first treatment options on the market. I think also Stayble, what we've been doing for the last almost 10 years, feels strange to say it, but it's quite soon 10 years since the idea was formed back in 2012. We really put Stayble in a position where we've gone through the early stage development. We are now a recognized player in the field of back pain. When you read market reports, we are one of the actors that really could change the future here. And I think also we have a good track record of taking this treatment from an early stage idea back in 2012 until a large clinical phase 2 trial that's currently enrolling. So for being a pharmaceutical company, it's always about the different timelines. I remember when I was presenting at Chalmers Ventures, and I was saying that in the tech projects, you always count weeks, months, but in pharma, you count years. And 10 years is quite a quick journey from the idea until a large trial. So it's been an interesting, quite quick process. And I think a lot of that has to do with us working with a known drug substance. So we're working with lactic acid as our API, which gives us the possibility to really push this idea quicker forward, but also to a lower risk. So the risk management is also a very important factor for us. So the summary. It's really the therapeutic gap that we're focusing on. We have a clinical phase 2 trial ongoing, and it's really the disease-modifying component that is very important to remember. I would also like to touch a little bit on this, because I think some people are, when I'm out speaking, saying that back pain isn't killing people, but it's actually a lot of patients die connected to back pain. Opioid misuse, abuse, and death due to opioid overdoses is a vast problem, not only in the US, but of course the largest portion are in the US. And you see that almost 2/3 of all deaths are due to overdoses, are based on opioids. And chronic back pain stands for almost 50% of all these patients. So I would actually like to say that back pain kills. Not directly, but indirectly. And I think that's an area where we really can help, because we can come in early and we can help patients not ending up in this never-ending loop of opioid misuse. And I think the scary part is like 1 or 2 doses could really hook you up with the misuse. So they're really so potent. And it's really something that both the FDA and European authorities are pushing. That helps us, of course, really highlighting the need of new type of treatments in this area. So what are we doing, and why do we think that we actually can help these type of patients? Let's just start with back pain or degenerative disc disease. What is it? Why are you caused pain? There are primarily 2 components. You have a leakage of inflammatory substances that is chemical irritating the nerves in the back, and you also have an instability, which is the rationale for why you sometimes perform spinal fusion. The reason for getting this disease is a little bit unknown. You have, of course, the age of the spine. You have a little bit of health components, because you have a curvature of the spine, which means that you put a lot of pressure on the lower lumbar area, and especially the lower discs. And then, of course, obesity is affecting this. But it's mostly also a lot of unknown reasons, because you have this degeneration in the disc. You can see a healthy person having degenerative discs, and you can have an unhealthy person having not that degenerative discs. So it depends. It's really about the image of having these changes of the disc, but also the symptoms. So it's a lot about when you set the diagnosis, you have magnetic resonance image combined with the patient's felt pain, which is very important to combine it together to be able to set the diagnosis. So what we are doing is that we inject our substance directly into the intervertebral disc, where it triggers the cells to produce collagen. This induces a transformation into connective tissue, which stabilizes the segment and eliminates the possibility of leakage. So by doing this, we believe that we actually can remove the underlying causes of the back pain and make the patient long-term pain relieved. It's a single injection. It's given in a hospital procedure, and we believe that you will have the efficacy of after somewhere about 3 to 12 weeks after injection. So not an immediate pain relief, but it's a long-term treatment. And I think that's the important factor for many of these patients, that you actually can get away from having this enormous pain. So that was the little bit of introduction to Stayble. And then we get the busy slide with the journey, because it's, as I said, it's almost 10 years now, or it's more than 10 years if you see it really from the idea creation. So you got an idea at Gothenburg University, was a professor called Kjell Ullmacher that's really been thinking about new ways of treating back pain. In our field, stem cells has really been a dominating research area, and it's all about trying to make the disc young and healthy again, and that is a very good thought. They haven't been able to demonstrate it yet. They've done large trials and they can't see this younger discs produced. So he was thinking, can you do it in a different way? Can you actually innovate? Can you think completely different? And then his idea was, can you transfer the disc into connective tissue? You get the stabilization, you remove the leakage, and that could actually be a treatment. So I think that was a very bold statement, going completely against what everyone else was doing in the field. But it really was the trigger point of Stayble, and that was the idea that formed Stayble. And then during the first coming 2 years, we really put the project team in place. We screened the different types of molecules that could actually fit and achieve this transformation, but also, of course, that were patentable to be able to be protected, that we could build the company around it. So we said, me and Matthias, that were starting the company together in 2014. It was a previous project at the School of Entrepreneurship, but the ones running it thought they wouldn't do something else. So me and Matthias said, let's see if we can find some funding for this. And because we thought it had a lot of characteristics that were very interesting. I had just failed my previous project where we demonstrated that placebo had a better efficacy than active drugs. So it was just shutting that project down. And then it felt very compelling with Stayble, with the large market, the very well-defined need. We had a possibility of a strong patent potential. We also had a known drug substance which could speed up development. So there were a lot of characteristics that we thought this could really be something. So we formed the company in 2015. I did my first recruitment of Anders Lehmann, who's the chief scientific officer, still with the company. Very scary recruitment. Worked 22 years at AstraZeneca, going into a small company, but we've really been working excellent together for the last almost 8-9 years. Everything from going to scientific congresses to having discussions with investors. It's really interesting to be able to work together. So we got some funding from Vinnova to do the really early stage. Then we founded a small company. We did some investment from Chalmers Ventures. I think we were one of the first investments actually from Chalmers Ventures when they were setting up their new structure. And we had a couple of business angels that were joining us as well. And to discuss with IPO, these investors, the business angels, were quite used to IPOs. They were part in pre-IPOs, they were part in IPOs at that stage. It was really when First North and Spotlight were starting to get traction, you're getting more and more companies getting listed. So the idea of listing in the company has really been from the start. But we always thought that we are a pharmaceutical company, we have long development lines, we have a lot of risk. It's important to really progress the company before we actually list it. So we continued working as a non-listed company. We did the preclinical development, we got good results. We funded the company additionally with Almi, a couple of more business angels, to be able to do the first clinical trial. And that's what we were doing during those years. 2017, 2018, we did a phase 1 trial. We added some more cash because we wanted to prepare for the next step. But we also got a little bit delayed, but not too much. But mostly trying to focus for the phase 2 trial. We got excellent results from the phase 1 trial in 2019. We demonstrated safety and tolerability, which of course was the main goal, but we also saw something that we define as biological efficacy, which means transformation of connective tissue. So with that very positive data from the phase 1 trial, we were really trying to see how could we progress this. We wanted to do a large phase 2b trial, and we looked at different options to fund it, and we ended up choosing an IPO at First North during March in 2020. And I think for us, we thought that we had a lot of characteristics that fitted the public market. We had an idea that people could understand. We had a science that was not too complex. We had quite a well-defined market, but also a disease that everyone could relate to. Everyone knows someone who's had back pain, and I think all of us have had back pain in different periods of life, but perhaps not of this actual cause. But you can really relate to it. And we also thought that we actually had matured to a sufficient level. We had a phase 2b trial, so it was quite, it always depends who you talk to, but for us it's a little bit more late stage, even though that AstraZeneca still defines us as early stage. But we've been doing it for quite some years and thought that now is a good time. It's quite well defined, the step that we're going to do forward. But then we had some challenges during 2021, as most of you. COVID made patient recruitment very difficult, which made us getting a little bit delayed in patient recruitment. And I think that's something that we're going to come back to when we discuss IPOs. And becoming delayed is not something that the stock market enjoys. So that made it difficult for us. We had a warrant that was supposed to continue to fund the company, but that was out of money. So we ended up doing a rights issue in early 2021 to be able to fund the continuance of the trial. So that's really where we are today. We have funded the entire study, and we have seeing a very positive trend in patient recruitment. We hope to recruit all patients during the year and report top line during next year. So this is an exciting year, and the next year is of course going to be even more exciting when we actually can see, is this working or not? Perfect.
Thank you, Andreas. So let's, an applause. Thank you. So let's get the panel up on stage, and I have a couple of questions to start with, maybe. Great. Thank you. So I guess the first one is to Andreas. How has life changed for your company since you were listed?
I think there's been a different focus. Being a pharmaceutical company, you always have very, very long timelines. You have the goal very far away, but you have tried to understand the different smaller steps and really emphasize on what are the steps until you can really demonstrate the big picture. So I think pros and cons, but you're more focused in the short term, trying to figure out how to develop the company in the best possible way, both long term and short term, I would say. Great.
So a question then to Tobias, or you can decide who answers. But what is your role in this? What can you help with? What is IPO ready that you mentioned in your introduction?
I can start. Yeah. Well, when you do the IPO, it's a lot of formalia. You got to fulfill that. You got the board of directors that actually has the experience to show that to the market that you got the license to operate under the Nasdaq or Spotlight or First North. That's one of the part. But there are also a lot of other parts. Well, do we have the management team to actually drive this company as a listed company? That's usually you come from a smaller entity. You don't have the board meetings as maybe you should, and the annual general meeting, of course. That's a couple of parts that we usually tend to help with. But also, Tobias, we got the IPO readiness study, don't we?
Yes, so what we have is also, we have different kind of specialities and experts in the company. So that's kind of one part of what we can assist with, is that we have the IPO readiness program. We also have kind of pre-IPO experts that are working with Nasdaq in some cases, but also helping kind of our clients or people that we're trying to assist in this process. And also from my perspective, looking at the taxes and the owners, how should they treat and go into it could be in this case the IPO or an exit or this type of things, and thinking about how should they own their own company and treat how should they classify their shares in the company. Could be important from a tax perspective.
Yeah, I guess taxes isn't what the entrepreneur thinks about the first, going into an IPO. So thank you for that. And from an investor side, Jonas, when is a company, would you say, ready for listing or an?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, but I think it's important to have the right prerequisites to be to not say too much, but it's important to have a verified business model, I would say. That's one thing that is important. And with that goes, of course, a verified product. For example, if you're a medtech company, it's good if you have a CE mark, for example, and if you have some regulatory approvals and maybe also reimbursement approvals from different countries. But it's because you need to deliver on the expectations. Not doing that will cause some problems when you are on the listed.
Yeah. So what could those expectations be? I mean, you were talking of trials and getting Andreas the company moving forward, but what are the expectations that could be put on a company?
Of course, for Stayble's case, it's deliver the clinical data. For a pharma company, it's quite clear, I would say. So it depends on what type of company you are. If you're a medtech company, it's regulatory approvals. Of course, sales is always deliver growth to show that you can actually grow. In accordance with what you have maybe said in the documents prior to being listed. To mention a few things, but there is a lot more.
No, I think also for us it's a lot about trying to educate the stock market and trying to understand what are the important milestones, how to actually communicate them, because I think from a communication perspective, it's a lot about having a continued news flow, having different types of time points where you actually can communicate to the market. And I would definitely agree that you need to be very clear about the milestones. You need to under promise and over deliver to really be able, but also to get the market to understand the challenges and what is a positive milestone. I think for us being a pharmaceutical company, like getting approval to start a trial, it might not sound too much, but it's really a long process and it's a very important step. And I think that's something that we are continuously working with different channels to be able to educate the market, to really get them to understand and prepare them for the coming milestones. That we have a milestone that is important and that we'll achieve it at that time point. But this is why it's important. I think really trying to plan. I think communication-wise, I think we were not really ready when we listed the company. We talked about it a lot, but we didn't really realize the magnitude of having the milestones laid ahead, I would say.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Yes. You mentioned there when you did the IPO, I assume you did an issue of new shares.
Yep.
Then you mentioned you get another 40 million with rights issues.
Yeah. So we
Is
did
that the same thing, or what happened with the cap table when you took in the extra 40 million?
Yeah, so we did IPO, and we did a unit IPO. So we had the IPO where we got 35 million, and then we had a warrant that was supposed to add the additional capital that we needed. That was around 35 million additionally. That warrant was out of money, mainly due to COVID, and we weren't able to over deliver on the milestones. So then we did a new issue. So it was new shares and was issued to the public. So in Swedish, a företrädesemission. So yes, new shares.
Okay, so at the IPO you had a plan to get in 60 million something.
The IPO was planned for 35 million, and then we had a warrant that could add between 35 to 70 million, depending on the share price.
Okay, so the share price was not developing
good
enough to use that one. Okay,
exactly.
Thank you.
And maybe to add on that also, because why is it so important to deliver on what you have said? Maybe it's usually it's sales and showing that you actually grow. It's because several of the investors are not long term. So if you under-deliver, you will have severe problems in raising capital in the maybe you have 2 or 3, maybe 2 chances, then you will be really low in equity and valuation of the company.
So as an investor, how long, I mean, after an IPO, are you still in? Are you?
Chalmers Ventures, we are long-term owners. It goes both for unlisted and listed companies. So we have a long-term commitment, and which we carefully plan together with the company, of course, and the key personnel.
Great. More questions from the audience? Yes, lots of them. Who wants to go first? Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, Kristina Bjerkby, and been assisting Andreas a very short period, and just prior to the IPO. But it's not what I wanted to say actually. It was, is it in Sweden we're tendency to go for an IPO quite early, more as a crowdfunding, like in US they go for exit. So I don't know. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, of course, it's a way to finance the company. That's of course one of the main reasons why it perhaps happens. In some cases, a little bit too early, and there are several aspects, positive aspects as well. But that goes back to if you have this verified business model and verified product, and you have actually sales coming in showing growth, then and then you have several possibilities to maneuver in another way. So
Deliver more data, more information, everything to the market is quite high pressure.
yeah, it's like night and day if you compare to an unlisted company. So it's I think it's a very long process, and you need to be ready for information flow to the market inside the company. You have all the insider rules. That is really, you need to think what you say when you take your morning coffee to the to the employees. And yeah, there's a lot of, it's a long process, it's a lot, but it's also could be good also because it puts pressure on the company to deliver, and that's one thing that is good. And also you will be more famous as a company, then you can attract more maybe skilled people. So there are several benefits, but I think it relates to how sure you are to deliver on positive things to the market.
So a question to Matthias and Tobias. You've been through a couple of these IPOs, etc. What are the common, what do you say, fallgropar in Swedish? Pitfalls, thank you, Helena, that you should avoid as a company?
Yeah, I think, taking what you said as well, looking at the time period, how quickly you're trying to move onto the market. So usually it's good to take your time and start working with getting your financials, from our perspective, the boring parts of the company, getting your financials in check, everything ready. You spoke about information, how that process works, so that's important as well. Having the structures in place in order to go to the market. So that's something we see that takes time, and we've been with going for the larger stock markets as well, not only maybe let's say Spotlight or First North, but if you're moving to the larger markets, you have a lot of responsibilities that are way beyond maybe the already big responsibilities for the smaller markets, where it takes time. And if you try to stress that in a short time frame, because when you start the process of going and doing an IPO, everything moves very quickly. So in that time period, you put a lot of stress on the people in the company. You're gonna have to prepare to work a lot of hours to get everything in place. But from our experience, what we see is that if you start in time and maybe you try to work as a listed company already maybe 1 or 2 years ahead, trying to get the the different structures and process in place in time, trying to act as this listed company without being it, you might get a simpler time with the investors as well, because then they will get the good information and you have this in place. But everything will move so much smoother and easier when you start going into the market later on. So I think in quite a few processes that I've been with, it's been very stressful getting everything in place. Sometimes you had to push the deadline a few times because it's not possible to get, there's so many people involved, so many different actors that are trying to work at the same time in different places in the company.
Thank you for a good presentation, Andreas. And Helena Ribberfors, I'm a colleague to Jonas, and I work as head of legal at Chalmers Ventures, an old ICM student, by the way. I'm a bit curious about what you elaborated a little bit upon, and that's the trust part, because of course, when you enter into the stock market, it's all about, educating the market. And I'm thinking many of the students and also business developers in the audience, they indeed will have challenges just explaining the business model, explaining the technology, and there are so many different layers. Can you elaborate a bit more upon that, and perhaps the other persons in the panel as well?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a business where you need to have a lot of trust, and I think it's for us it's important to have both education, trying to deliver what we are saying that to do, but it's also about transparency, trying to be open to the market and trying to communicate. And I think that's talking about what you can't say to your employees in the morning coffee. I think for us it's a lot about trying to continuously communicate, even though bad news is always bad news, but it's better to give the news and trying to work with them, because that will make life easier for you when you are speaking to people. You have something that are quite recently released that you can refer to. So I think it's a lot about trying to be as transparent as you can, and I think that builds trust. Delays are happening, and trying to also educate and trying to get people to understand why does this happen, what was the factors, what are we trying to do to speed up. For us it's all about patient recruitment basically, but what type of activities are we doing, how can we actually increase this, what are the new deadlines. And I think the stock market does not like delays, of course, but the thing that it hates the most is uncertainty and undefined risk. If they know deadlines, they know the risk, it's much easier for them to put Stayble in their portfolio and have it as a de-risked portfolio. So I think transparency and trying to communicate as much as you can is the way to build trust, and be out there as well to answer questions to investors. I have quite a lot of investors calling me at the different time periods, and I usually try to take the calls and discuss with them, because it's really educates me, and it gives an understanding what are the factors that they are really wanting to know more about.
More questions?
Also about the benefits with an IPO. I was thinking, if you were in a situation where you have 100 million available from current owners, and then you have the option then to go public and get those 100 million. So as a co-founder, also for all the owners in the company, in that situation, what is the benefits of going the IPO track and not taking the money from the current owners if they are there?
I think it depends a lot about the market. I think pharmaceutical companies in most cases benefit from being unlisted, because it's a lot about the trying to conceive the message. I think Stayble has factors make it easier for us, but if you have a very high-tech pharmaceutical development company, in most cases it's better to not be public. But I think also, like Jonas was you saying, you really put some pressure on the company. You have to deliver. So I think listed company really focus perhaps a little bit more than unlisted companies in some areas. I think that could be a benefit. I think from an owner and co-founder, a listed company dilutes co-founders and early stage owners, because you have a lot of different types of structures. You have a lot of discounts for new issues, etc., that you perhaps don't have in an unlisted environment. So definitely pros and cons. But I wouldn't say, going back to your question, I wouldn't say listing a company on First North or Spotlight is not an exit, it's a funding process. Of course, you can exit smaller amounts, but it's very difficult for a person that is within the company to sell shares because of the reporting to Finansinspektionen, but also you have a lot of badwill if you sell your shares. So
Okay, so even if you can theoretically sell some shares now,
it's very difficult.
No.
The turnover each day is quite low in many of these companies. So if you perhaps want to sell for 1 million Swedish crowns, you're gonna drop the share price with perhaps 10 to 20% that day because you don't really have the underlying buying power.
Okay, so mostly attention for the company.
Definitely.
All right, thank you.
When you talk to an investor about raising a round of investment, you usually get the question like, how will I get my money back in the end? Like, how can I make my exit? And I mean, there's two ways, of course. It's an IPO or you exit by selling a company. When do you need to make this decision, or do you have to make this decision at all? And also, like, how should you make this decision, whether an IPO or an exit?
Was that to me?
Yeah. So if it's, could you maybe repeat the question once again? I didn't really.
Usually, when you speak to an investor, they want to know how they will get their money back in the future. And for a young company, should you have determined already at this young stage if you're going to make an IPO or if you want to exit? Do you need to decide, or when should you decide?
Yes, I think it's as the IPO concept is best if you are a company that can deliver growth. You have a verified business model, you have sales, you have a verified product, you have all the permits ready. Then it could be really nice to be listed to be a listed company, because then you have the prerequisites to actually increase the share price, delivering in some way return on investments. Not that you're getting them, but in the value goes up, and of course, if you continue to grow and you maybe get listed on some of the major platforms where there are more liquidity, where you actually can sell, then there is different possibilities to do exits, both for the founders and maybe the investors as well, in some specific targeted deals to institutions and other players that are interested to get a ownership in this company that actually has delivered positive news to the market. So I think you should really think through this, and also what we have been talking about here a little bit, also to have all the things to be. I listed a company that wasn't really some challenges in order to get everything up and running, to be in line with what you need to be in line with for being listed. Then you will have some not too much sleep actually, and you will have some issues. So it's really good to have for example, Chalmers Ventures, to have investors and owners that really helps to deliver those things over time, so that you do not prepare in the process of doing an IPO, which maybe takes 6 months, because then it will be very risky that you will not build this trust and and you will get transparency, whether you will or want it or not, because all these reports and rules on information creates transparency, whether it's good or whether it's bad.
But I also think you don't have to decide really early. I think we had an ongoing discussions in 2015 to list a company or not to list a company, and we had a couple of owners that really wanted to list a company to get the liquidity. Perhaps they can't really sell large portions, but they could still get a bit more liquidity being a listed company. But we always said that for each financing round, we should always evaluate different options, and an IPO was always an option. I think that was something good as well to say to the investors that we of course would like to have your money, but we also have this opportunity with this different types of agreements that you could do. So I think it's always good to have both. And I would say if you can push towards a classic exit or a buyout, that would of course be, I think, the most beneficial part for the company if that would be possible. So I wouldn't really compare it as an exit, but you can definitely have those two processes going parallel for a very long period of time.
I completely agree with you, Andreas, and don't limit yourself to we should go for the IPO or we shouldn't go. Make the company able to take the IPO, but don't say that we necessarily should do this. But having it as an option is great for you and the company.
I would say prepare yourself to both from a communication perspective, but also from a personal perspective, that you will be put in positions where people will ask you difficult questions. You need to really prepare yourself for the process, and you want to be part of the process, and be an external party. You will have investors that will be calling you, and you really need to think through what are you communicating, what can you say and what can't you say. I think that would be something that I will give as my recommendation to really think through.
Yep, and something we didn't talk about, and from the tax perspective, then just kind of keep an eye on the cap table of the company, trying to know if you have qualified shares, kvalificerade aktier in closely held corporations. That changes quickly in a rapid growth company. So just keeping an eye on that and knowing what type of company you are from a tax perspective and for the ownership. That would help when you're trying to sell or go to an IPO, and knowing how to own your company. Should it be through holding companies or directly? So that's something that sometimes are missed when you're focusing on everything else. The taxes comes as a last thing that you look at.
Don't rush in. Make sure you got the time to actually do the IPO. And as we mentioned earlier, don't overpromise and underdeliver. Do the opposite way instead. That's better for you.
Okay, what can I add to this? Very good things. Maybe I think it's important to, I've said it, maybe this is the third time now, but to really verify your business model, to get to some kind of readiness and to think that through, to have a verified business model, product, and to be able to deliver on expectations that you will need to put into this memorandum or to the market. So you really will be able to do that.
Thank you, all of you in the panel, and thank you, audience, for being so patient, also staying, which means it's an interesting subject on stage.